I don't really know how to synopsize. Is that a verb? Synopsize? It is now. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Megan, and today I'm going to be sharing with you all of the books that I read in June. This month was a little bit weird for me because I ended up reading 31 books, which is a lot. However, I read quite a few books that I was just not the biggest fan of. So it was a mediocre month for me overall, but I did read a few that are some new favorites. So it ended up balancing out on both ways. So I'm going to kind of do a worst to best kind of review or announcing, I guess you could say. But I am going to start with nonfiction. The nonfiction books I read were the Girl Wash Your Face trilogy. So I did audiobooks of Girl Wash Your Face, Girl Stop Apologizing, and Didn't See That Coming. I actually really enjoyed the first book, and I felt like I gathered a lot from it, and I felt like I had a lot of the same views as Rachel Hollis. However, as the trilogy progressed, I felt like it was just the same book over and over, and I felt like Rachel got a little like fat phobic and classist, I guess. Like, I don't even know how to describe it, but like putting down people who are in lower socioeconomic classes, and I ended up just not vibing overall after I finished the third book. So I'm probably going to be unhauling this one. Next, I read the Alex and Eliza trilogy, and the same thing kind of happened with this trilogy. I really loved the first book. I felt like it was a fantastic historical fiction novel based on Alex and Eliza Hamilton. However, the second and third book, All for One, ended up just not being the same level as the first book for me. So Alex and Eliza itself was probably a 4.5 to 5 stars for me, whereas Love and War and All for One were 3 to 3.5 for me. So complete downgrade as the series progressed. I will say All for One was better than Love and War, but I feel like the character arcs were not consistent with how the character arcs happened in Alex and Eliza. For example, Eliza's whole story is about how she doesn't care about classes, and then in the third book she's pushing for people to fall in love with certain classes, and it's just a weird kind of vibe going on with Eliza specifically throughout the series. And because in May I reread Wicked Fox, I picked up Vicious Spirits in June, and I will say that I probably didn't like this one as much as I liked Wicked Fox. And this one we are following Somin, who is the friend of Mi-young and Ji-hoon in the first book, and then Junwoo, who is the, I forget what his species is, but he's kind of the dealer of magic of this world, and their love story. So I actually preferred their love story to Mi-young and Ji-hoon's. However, I felt like it was trying to do too many things at once in this, and I feel like it was just not a one consistent plot, and we were jumping all over the place and nothing was really consistent. So yeah, I'm probably not going to like this one as much as Wicked Fox. I think I gave this one 3.5 stars. Next, I read Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. After reading With the Fire on High by Elizabeth last year, I really thought that I was going to love this book. However, I feel like novels in verse are just not something that I'm into because I was not a huge fan of this book. I love the storyline, however, I found the two characters, I didn't feel like there was a distinct enough voice between the two characters, and I often got them confused. Especially since they were going with very similar problems, I guess. I'm gonna try to describe it, but again, I got the sisters confused a lot, so I might be mixing up some of their plot lines. However, we're following two sisters, one who lives in America and is pretty well off, and then one who lives outside of America and is in a lower socioeconomic class, and they have the same father. However, they don't know they have the same father, they don't even know that the others exist. All they know is that their father leaves them for long periods or long durations of a time to go on like business trips per se, and one day on his plane trip the plane crashes, and now they're both dealing with the grief of losing their father and then coming to terms with finding out about the other families. And So they have very similar problems they're going through. They're both dealing with both of those things. However, I think one of them is dealing with being like left behind, and then one of them is dealing with like horrible sexual assault things, and I forget which one's which. I'm pretty sure the sexual assault is the one that does not live in America. So yeah, it was a good story. However, like I said, the execution of the inverse format is just not for me, so I ended up giving this one a 4 stars, like 3.5, 4 stars. Next, I read The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson, and I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really vibe with this story at all. I usually like sci-fi, but I find it hard to work in elements of contemporary mixed with sci-fi or contemporary mixed with fantasy elements. So I was struggling with that because of those elements. The concept of it sounded really good, however the execution just was not there for me. It just wasn't my favorite book. In this, we are following a world in which they have discovered alternate universes or alternate worlds, and the only way you can travel between the worlds are if your parallel person or the person in that other world does not exist and or is dead in that world. And we are following a girl who can travel to the most. Out of 400, she can travel to 372 because she's only alive in 8 universes or 8 worlds. So I really liked the idea of this. It just wasn't there for me. And I promise this is the last one that was a lower review for me. This was probably one of my least favorite reads of the month, unfortunately. It was Witches Steeped in Gold by Shannon Smart. I had such high hopes for this. The other books, I didn't really feel super strongly either way, so I just gave it that middle of the line 3 to 3.5 stars. However, I believe I gave this one 2 stars because I just did not like it. I felt like it was very shallow, like there was not a lot of depth to things. There was too many plot lines going on at once to really understand what was happening. There was no world building. The characters were not distinct enough between each of the 2 main characters. The romance was super cringy and not believable at all. Overall, this was just not the book for me, unfortunately. It was the book club pick for June, so that's unfortunate that it didn't work out, but we all have different opinions. I know a lot of people still did like this. It's said to be about 2 witches who ally to team up against a greater badness. However, I don't feel like they actually ever allied, so I don't really know how to synopsize. Is that a verb? Synopsize? It is now. This book, because I feel like even the synopsis didn't do a good job of explaining what happened, and I feel like I couldn't really even tell you what happened because I was just not into it, unfortunately. Okay, I'm gonna blow through these next 3 really quickly because they were rereads for me, and I loved all 3 of them. I reread Heart of Flames, Daughter of the Pirate King, and Fable. Heart of Flames is the 2nd book of the Crown of Feathers trilogy. Daughter of the Pirate King is the 1st book, in which we are following, you guessed it, the daughter of a pirate king. And Fable is also a pirate story in which we are following Fable, who was left on an island by her father, and she has to find a way to work off it somehow. I'm also going to blow through the next ones fairly quickly as well. I read volumes 4, 5, and 6 of Amulet. It is a 9-book graphic novel series following Emily and Navin, who are brother and sister. Their father passed away, so their mother took them to this mansion owned by her grandpa, and in the basement they discover a secret world, and Emily is labeled a stonekeeper, Navin is labeled like the commander of the army here, and they are on the quest to save this realm from the Elf King. Next, I read volumes 6 through 10 of The Promised Neverland, my favorite manga series. Please check this out. It follows some kids at an orphanage who discover a secret that make them want to escape. So the storyline is following their escape from the orphanage and then what they're doing after and so on and so forth. So good. And next I read Heartstopper volumes 1, 2, and 3. I only have a physical copy of volume 1, however I did read volumes 2 and 3 on Webtoon. So I absolutely adore this series. Nick and Charlie are everything. Absolute cinnamon rolls. I wish I could be best friends with them. Just the most heartwarming, gushy Yes, graphic novel out there, I swear. Next are some of the books I actually enjoyed reading this month beyond the graphic novels. First, I read Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the first book of the Brown Sisters trilogy, and in this one we are following Chloe, who experienced a near-death accident and has now decided to get a life. And she has created a bucket list, and she garners the help of her landlord, Red, to help her complete this bucket list. And it's an enemies to lovers, super cute, and there's a lot of great representation in here. I will say that Chloe has, I think it's fibromyalgia or some sort of chronic illness, and Red has experienced physical abuse from an ex, so there's some great representation in there. Next, I read Internment for my hard-hitting contemporary prompt on the Game of TBR last month. This is by Samira Ahmed, and we are following a family who is taken into a Muslim American internment camp during a time in which it's almost like an alternate reality in which there is a leader who starts these internment camps because they're very against Muslim Americans, and it is so, I don't even know how to describe it. It's very intense, powerful. I don't want to use the word powerful, but it's pretty intense, and I think it was really important to read. I will say that the romance in this does take away a bit from the plot. I didn't really feel like it was really necessary. But the audiobook is fantastic. I read it as an audiobook format, and they have elements of like knocking and the bullhorn and just those sound effects that really pull you into the book. Next, I read Truth Witch by Susan Dennard. This is the first book of the Witchlands novels series and has been recommended to me over and over by my friend Callum. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. It took me a bit of time to get into. I don't think I was really into it until about page 100. So that was a little frustrating to me because I really wanted to like it, but by the scene, I'm just going to say the dance scene, that's where I got pulled in, and I really, really loved that scene. The romance in this is also fantastic so far. I believe I can kind of see where there's two elements of romance or two relationships forming, and I love both of those, and I'm really excited to see where we go next in the second book. Next, I picked up Unravel the Dusk, which is the sequel to Spin the Dawn. I personally love this series. It is the Blood of Stars series. It's a duology. The first book is Spin the Dawn, and we're following Maya, who just wants to be the Imperial Tailor. However, as a female, she is not given this opportunity, so she dresses as her brother and enters the contest to become one anyway. And it's basically Mulan meets Project Runway is what it's pitched as. However, about halfway through the first book, we switch gears and go into like a quest journey element instead of. But quests and journeys are also one of my favorite tropes, so I still really enjoyed it. And then in this book, we are following Maya as she is dealing with the repercussions of a choice she made at the end of Spin the Dawn. So I really enjoyed it. Next, I read Daughter of the Siren Queen. This or the last one here are probably my favorite reads of the month. Daughter of the Siren Queen I actually enjoyed even more than Pirate King. I think this is one of the best sequels, like satisfying endings of all time, at least to me. I love pirate tropes. Everything about like piracy, mermaid elements will always suck me in, and this continued to follow that pattern, I guess. And finally, the last book I read for the month was One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this one because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a huge fan of contemporaries mixed with fantasy/sci-fi elements. However, this totally worked for me. In this book, we are following August, who is a cynical 20-something-year-old, and she has never really rooted herself down anywhere. She constantly goes from degree to degree, school to school, location to location. She only has like 4 boxes of items to her name. She's just never really rooted down anywhere. However, one day she moves to New York City and goes on the subway to get to school and meets Jane, and it's love at first sight. However, Jane has an interesting thing happening to her. She can never leave the sub because she is actually from, I believe it's the 1970s, and somehow got stuck in time or lost in time, and is now stuck on this subway train. So it's their story. It's a sapphic romance, and it was fantastic. It really identified with a lot of the things that August was going through, so I just, yeah, read One Less Stop. It's fantastic. So those are all the books I read in the month of June. Let me know what you guys read down below, and I'll check you in my next one. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye, friends.